back memories, Bill?
Oh, sure.
You remember? You were the moderator.
Yeah, it was for that one. It was kind of
Yeah.
fun, wasn't it?
Fun. I don't know if that's the word I used to describe it.
Kind of a Halloween themed. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. See, I know once I start speaking. My name is Mark Sloan, and I am president of the Central Street Neighbors Association, and we are hosting this candidates forum tonight here. Thank you all for coming out. At Central Street Neighbors, we really have kind of a mission of informing, educating, and then advocating for all citizens here in Evanston, and especially for those living in the north side of Evanston here. So thank you very much for coming out. Our website, for those of you that want to read more about Central Street Neighbors and want to join, is centralstreetneighbors.com. So please go to that, and you will see a lot of this is being taped right now, and it'll be on our website as well. We wanted to just quickly introduce our moderator tonight, and that is Jeff Smith. Jeff is a founding member of Central Street Neighbors. He is also a past president and currently serves on the board of Central Street Neighbors Association. I like to say that if Jeff got or was paid $1 for every volunteer hour that he spent making this community a better place, he'd be a very, very wealthy man today. So without further ado, here's Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for those kind remarks. And thank everybody for coming out here tonight. We know there's a lot of other things that compete for your time and attention, but you're paying attention to the folks that will be serving us or want to serve us in Springfield is of paramount importance. This is not strictly a debate tonight. We're going to go over the ground rules very quickly. I asked the candidates here to answer the questions that will be asked of you by directing your attention to the audience, not to me. I know I make a good target, but that's where the cameras and the votes are. Please pay strict attention to time because we have 6 candidates and only a lot of questions that people are interested in hearing. And you will be given a 30-second warning, a little green sign, in case you're not wearing your glasses. A 15-second warning is the yellow caution, and then the red stop sign, which we hope you won't blow through because I've got some of those extra round manuals you can't see. There is no interrupting of another candidate while they're speaking. If you believe, and only use this in the extreme, that you or your position have been mischaracterizing someone else's answer, or that your opponent dodged and didn't answer the question, then you can raise your little orange card and you'll get 20 seconds to make a corrective statement to which there will be no reply. We're going to have hopefully about 10 questions of approximately 1 minute answer each. Some of them we might have a little longer or a little shorter. And then at the end, you'll all have the opportunity to ask your opponent one question. And if we have time, and we can squeeze in some questions that have floated up from the audience, and then you'll have some closing remarks. So without further ado then, we're going to proceed to the opening remarks. We ask the audience to be respectful. Everybody who's running for office is giving up their time, far more than volunteers for any organization. And they spend their evenings when they could be at home with their family, out shaking hands. They're up in the mornings and in the cold at the train stations. And win or lose, whether we like what they do or not, they're putting in time and service, and we're awfully happy that they've come here in respect for this community and this neighborhood. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming out. I would make one note is that Daniel Biss had a pre-scheduled forum tonight, and acting as a surrogate for him tonight is Elizabeth Tisdale, Mayor of Evanston. So if we could start, I guess, down, and we'll start from this end. So that Liz, you're less prepared to being Daniel Biss than anybody else is. And if you could each give a minute and a half opening remark. Introduce yourself to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I just want to thank this association sincerely. It's so hard to find these forums where you can get the voters face to face and not have to be bugging them at home. Wow. Because it's on.
Is it not? Yeah.
All right. I'm Eric Lieberman. I'm going to be representing you in the 18th District in Springfield, starting in January. I'm born and bred in Evanston. It's daunting to be here at Haven School. I'm a graduate of Nichols. I've only been here once before in my life. I had a friend in college in Indiana and didn't see her for years. And she was performing here when Not the Website produced shows here, and we're now married. So this is a special place for me. This is usually a task done by young guys running for offices. I feel a special obligation as kind of an older guy to try to bring my experience, my wisdom, my training to helping us out of this mess that we're in Illinois. And we can talk about 1-minute answers and 20-second responses. There are no easy answers to this. There are no easy answers to this. And in my mind, this is about who you believe has the skills, persuasive powers, intelligence, and background to really get Springfield off its feet and do something about what's happening in Illinois. It's a tragedy, and we'll talk more about that tonight.
Thank you.
So good evening. My name is Robin Gable. I am currently the state representative for the 18th District. I would like to thank the Central Street Neighbors Association for hosting this event tonight. It's really my pleasure to be here among friends and neighbors. You know, this election is about leadership in a time of crisis. We face very hard decisions over the next few years that will make many people unhappy. I have shown throughout my career that I have the patience and courage that leaders need to be successful. In my 20s, I was chosen by my peers to be the co-executive director of the Chicago Women's Health Center. In my 30s, I was the top staffer for a reform alderman, Alderman Luis Gutierrez, who stood up to Ed Verdoliak. Then for many years, over 20 years, I was the executive director of the Illinois Maternal and Child Health Coalition, a policy and advocacy organization for women and children's health care. In that role, I grew the organization from a budget of $60,000 a year to a budget of $1.6 million. I was able to work with the legislature and passed very successful bills around health insurance for children. As a state representative for the past 2.5 years, I have been called on again to lead. As vice chair of the Appropriations for Human Services, I have had to make some difficult choices, and when we have gone around, I've sat in the room with Republicans and Democrats around the table. We've gone through the human services budget line by line and had to make some very difficult choices and make some very serious cuts. But that's what leadership looks like. I've also taken the lead on good government issues. I co-sponsored a bill with my colleague Daniel Biss to limit the number of terms a legislator could be in leadership, because no one should be allowed to run a branch of Illinois government for 30 years. I also sponsored a law to improve financial conflict of interest disclosures by elected officials so that their spouses have to reveal more information about their financial interests. Part of leadership is being able to listen to criticism. Just yesterday, I was criticized in the paper for wanting DCFS to have more money to do its job properly. I am more than happy to explain to anyone why I believe that our most vulnerable children deserve the best services that we can provide. So I look forward to discussing my positions and answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. John, if you could time these at 2 minutes.
The opening.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to the Evanston Neighborhood Association. And I agree with Robin. Illinois is definitely in a crisis. But I think during the crisis, we also need to be very transparent. One person who is not very transparent is Speaker Madigan. Speaker Madigan has ruled this Illinois with an iron fist for up to 30 years. He's been handpicking candidates along the way who are quite weak. Unlike my opponent, I have taken no money from outside interests. I haven't taken a dime from the Chicago Teachers Union or in fact, all the money has come from in or immediately around the district. Oh, I think no, I didn't have it up. Okay. Problem. My only interest is the 17th district. In addition to transparency, we must make Illinois a more business-friendly state. Under Democratic Party rule, the income tax rose 67.5%. As a result, we lost one of our few startup companies in Illinois, Jimmy John's. They'll take their jobs and revenue elsewhere. In order to reverse this terrible crisis, which nobody will like, pension and Medicaid reform will be necessary. In the long run, I think California has a great model, a hybrid plan for pensions. In addition, I think we do have to have some sort of Medicaid reform. We have to make sure that only legal residents of Illinois get Medicaid. In addition, a very small percentage of Medicaid recipients make up a large percentage of the people on Medicaid. This has been from a Wall Street Journal article in New Jersey and Ohio. We need to examine this fact for Illinois as well to see if that's the case. So, and finally, we really need to enact a hard property tax reform, because property taxes over the past 10 years in this district have doubled everywhere, but property values have fallen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kyle.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Laura Fine. I am a Democratic candidate for the 17th district. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running for this office. I am a pretty much lifelong member of the 17th district, except for a few years where I moved out after college. I grew up in Glenview, and then my husband and I decided to return there to raise our children. And we chose the district because of the fact that it has a wonderful quality of life. And it has wonderful schools, and representing our district, I would like to keep quality of life the way it is and the way most people move here. In the past year, I've talked to so many people at the door to talk about the issues and the concerns that are facing the people in the district. And many concerns are economic. We want to get back on our feet again. And that's something that's so important in this race that we have to focus on. I'm hopeful. I know it's a challenge. I know we have a lot of challenges facing our state government right now, and especially our state budget. But if I didn't think that we could move in the right direction, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I think if we could get nonpartisan elected officials to move in and work together, we can really find solutions and move in that right direction. With strong leadership and strong skills, this can be done. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I am a mom. I have 2 boys, and I have been married for almost 20 years. I am a teacher. I'm in the political science department at Northeastern Illinois University, and I am also the clerk in Northfield Township. I've been very involved in the community for many years. I'm on the board of directors of Links North Shore Youth Health Services, and I've been a volunteer at the local food pantry for coming up on 5 years now. So I'm looking forward to responding to questions in the next upcoming hour, and I want to thank you all for coming tonight and for sponsoring this forum.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name is Glenn Farkas. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, especially such a nasty weather night. You must all be really die-hard political junkies or really nothing good on Thursday night television. No Dancing with the Stars, no American Idol. There is a football game on. I'm a financial advisor. I have my own investment management firm. I started that a few years ago. I've got over 20 years experience in the private sector world. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. We just celebrated a 13-year anniversary yesterday. They're in the Glenview Public School District. I got in this race because I could no longer take the financial chaos and the corruption that was going on down in Springfield. When I moved here 20 years ago, started my career, got married, I really thought this was a place that I could stay. But I think probably like most of you out there, you start to question that. The way that things are going in Springfield, the way the economics are going in the state, it really doesn't look like, my kids get to college age, we may not stay. And a lot of people have already reported with their feet. I don't know if this happened to you, when I travel on vacation or you go out of town, and you tell somebody you're from Chicago, Illinois, they tend to giggle and laugh and bust up laughing. To me, that's kind of embarrassing and actually totally unacceptable. And I think one thing we could do, if we did all ourselves a favor, is probably vote out all the incumbents in the state. I look at this as a team. And the team that we've assembled, the players we put on the field, are just not getting the job done. It's like, too, when your computer jams up and you can no longer get anything to work, what do? You just push the reboot button and restart it. So I think we need to look at that. There are 3 issues in the state that really matter. It's pensions, Medicaid, and embracing the private sector. Pensions and Medicaid take up nearly 50% of the budget now. Within 5-7 years, it'll take up everything. If we really don't get serious about embracing the private sector, we're just kidding ourselves about ever running a balanced budget. So those 3 things I know we'll talk a lot about tonight: pensions, Medicaid, and embracing the private sector.
Thank you. I'm Liz Tisdall. I am not Daniel Biss, but I think the theory is that I'm better than an empty chair. I wanted to apologize for Daniel not being here. He had a long-standing commitment. He has held regular meetings for everyone in the district, and he is having one tonight. I believe it's on Medicaid. And so that is why he could not accept Central Street Neighbors, even though he is a Central Street neighbor and would very much like to be here. There are lots of reasons that I think Daniel should be our next state senator. He is first and foremost a math guy. And I go to Springfield and lobby a lot, and there are not a lot of people down there who understand basic math, much less Daniel's level of math. So he's become already in Springfield a very respected and admired leader in terms of reforming pensions. And I think we need to take that expertise and make sure that he goes to the Illinois State Senate and helps us get out of what is indeed, I agree with what everyone has said, there is a crisis in Springfield. When I go down there to lobby, I am so happy happy whenever I get to leave that place. I can't understand why all of you want to go there, but more power to you. The other thing about Daniel that he did not say enough in his resume is that he's a great representative in terms of getting to know people, knocking on doors, listening to people, talking with people. Every meeting that I'm at, I was at one for Evanston Township High School, and there was Daniel Biss and Robin Gable, by the way, who is also at everything but isn't as tall, so people don't realize she's there. So, I'm sorry, did you wave to stop at me, John? Not yet. Okay, thank you.
5 more seconds.
Oh, okay, I give up. Thanks, John.
Good, thank you. We're going to go in random order. Through the use of this high technology device known as dice, and each of you have been assigned a number, and whoever gets it will then answer the first question, and your opponent will go next, and so on and so forth until we've gone around in a circle. The first question goes to Mr. Frank, and this is about jobs. Illinois has added over 92,000 jobs since January 2010, according to the state budget document, including over 52,000 jobs during 2011, but remains at a level hundreds of thousands of jobs below what it was before the economic collapse. Can you identify one thing the Illinois government has done that has been either effective or ineffective, in your view, at creating jobs, and one specific thing that you believe you could accomplish to help build or change that effective or ineffectiveness?
First, Jeff, and anybody in the room, if you were a business person in some other part of the country, would you honestly want to locate in Illinois? I would. I think that if we enact pension reform and Medicaid reform, we certainly can ease our budget crisis. Once that occurs, and business has confidence that we will not raise taxes, and we will lower our taxes back to where they were before the surtax, I think we will have a lot more businesses. Wisconsin is doing pretty well. They have a budget surplus, believe it or not, and I think we could copy them, but not at 5% income tax. It's a cold place here. 5% state income tax, 9.3%. Highest corporate income tax in the entire world. No wonder businesses don't want to come here. So, that's my answer.
Thank you. Laura?
To improve the business quality within the state of Illinois, we need to get ourselves on a solid fiscal standing. We need to go through our budget, we need to go through it line by line so people understand it. They know where their tax dollars are coming in and how those tax dollars are being spent. Once we have that transparency, we need to create a fair taxing system for corporations. We can't give out sweetheart deals to one company or another because we've seen in our past that that does not work. So once we can get that in place, it will encourage more companies to open their doors in the state of Illinois. I think we need to look into more green businesses because if we have more green businesses opening doors in Illinois, we're going to have more sustainable companies with more sustainable jobs that will get people back into the workforce and improve the economy in the state.
Thank you. Glenn? Yeah, well, just the way it'll work is, if I wasn't clear, is that whoever gets it, their opponent answers next, and then we just keep on going in the same direction.
Okay, I got it now. I'm sharper than that. Illinois is like I said, a racehorse with a 300-pound jockey. We've got great resources in this state, but we're squandering them. You know, the number one thing we can do, again, is try to just convince businesses that we really want you here. I mean, have some respect for them instead of contempt. Number one thing I would do is repeal the corporate income tax immediately back down to 4%. It went up to 7%. We added 2.5% replacement. We're at 9.5% right now. So number one, we've got to convince them we really want the business. People have already mentioned we've got Jimmy John's, we've got Caterpillar that moved a plant to North Carolina because they didn't want to relocate here. Everything a business does has to be centered around profits and losses. And if they think they're on the hook for the huge debts in this state, which is another reason why Caterpillar moved, they looked at the situation and said, if we move this plant back, we're going to be stuck paying all these potential debts going forward. So again, the state's in a bad position. They backed themselves into a corner, and the only way out now is to really encourage that private sector business growth because we can't tax our way to profitability.
One of the things that you need to have in the state of Illinois for businesses to come here is pension reform, and as I said before, Daniel is a leader in that and respected throughout the state legislature for his work on pension reform. The other thing that he has talked about that is very exciting for Evanston is having a tech center. He's talked about Northwestern University, the University of Chicago, going all the way to the University of Illinois, and having a tech center and keeping tech businesses here. Well, I met with the head of the engineering department at Northwestern University recently. I've met with the head of the entrepreneur program. We are trying to follow Daniel's model and make sure that Oakton and the Code Academy come and teach our citizens the skills that they need to have jobs in tech, and we're trying to work with the university to be sure that the professors and the grad students and students who start tech businesses keep them in Evanston.
Thank you. So we'll go around and this is the deal. I'm an attorney that was asked to do a turnaround of a international software company. And the day I started, I called in the CFO to my office and he told me the company had a $3.5 million profit the year before. I got Grant Thornton and my own CFO, and they told me we had an $11 million loss in the prior year. That's a big swing. That's what's going on here in the state of Illinois. It's almost silly to talk about the numbers in the state. They are so wrong. They're just so wrong and in error. The first thing I would do was develop transparency and honesty in our numbers. I want you all to take a look at truthinaccounting.org. It's gone through the 50 states and looked at the financing and reporting and the honesty in the numbers, and we're right in the sinkhole, according to this neutral party. So cleaning up our numbers so we know what we're dealing with is priority number one.
Thank you.
When I was first elected, I co-hosted with Daniel Biss a meeting at Northwestern with a number of people to look at how we could create innovative technology jobs in Illinois. And we asked them, what are the barriers? What are some of the barriers to this? And one of the barriers that they identified were some of the workers' comp laws. And I'm pleased to say that last year we were able to change the workers' comp laws to save $700 million for businesses. We also were able to, okay, so I don't have a lot of time.
30. You got 30 seconds.
Okay, great. So what I've been saying, and I continue to say and believe, is that we cannot cut our way out of this crisis and we cannot tax our way out. We really need to grow our way out. One of the big fields in terms of job creation is advanced manufacturing. I've been looking into that. I'm going to be having a whole group committee working with me on coming up with ideas on what Illinois can do to really grow jobs here with folks from Kellogg and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your sticking to the time, because we really appreciate that. Now would not be the time for that. Thank you. A number of our responses to our survey that we put out, and many comments that we've gotten online, indicate that a lot of community members here feel that legislators are listening to political bosses, lobbyists, and campaign contributors rather than to residents. Is the perception correct? And what will you do to either reduce that reality, if it's a reality, or that perception, if it's not reality, and restore people's belief in the system? And this one will start off with Liz, and come work our way down. Thanks.
Well, Daniel Biss listens to the people in the district that he represents. He knocks on doors endlessly and has really substantive conversations with the people that he meets. He also works closely with the mayor of Evanston at least, and I know that the other mayors, he's met with all of them, and worked with them to address their city's needs. Daniel has not, as far as I know, raised a huge amount of money for this particular race, but he does, as I've said before, go to meetings and listen to people at meetings, and is very, very up on the issues that confront our community. So I have never, ever seen any campaign contributor have more influence than another citizen.
Question, yeah, for the first part?
It's generally relating to reducing at least the perception of corruption, not so much in a criminal sense, but the idea that legislators don't listen to residents as much as they do to political bosses, lobbyists, and campaign contributors.
I think everybody knows here that money talks in politics, right? And I don't think the mayor knows exactly what Daniel Biss has gotten, but I suggest you go to followthemoney.org and take a look at who Daniel's received a lot of campaign cash from. Now, Daniel wants to help on the pension front down in Springfield. Well, guess who one of the largest contributors is to Daniel's campaign fund? Would you be surprised it's the teachers' unions? Would you be surprised that Mike Madigan funded his account for his previous election with Hamilton Chang with hundreds of thousands of dollars? So if you want to talk about campaign finance reform, I'm all for that. But when you send somebody down to Springfield, you better look at who put the money in their pocket. You can look at mine, you'll see it's a bunch of individual contributors with the exception of one business that gave me $5,000. Mr. Biss has got close to $500,000 from those people. So again, you want to clean the system up, start following the money. Yeah, I'm getting it.
For me personally, I've been spending time away from my family and time walking on the streets. I'm in my third pair of Nikes, I have to honestly say, because since last November, I've been going door to door in all the communities within our district and talking to people. And I've found people have opened their hearts and their homes to me to discuss the issues that they feel are facing the state and that is facing them personally. I've talked to so many people who are concerned about their increase in property taxes, about their unemployment or their underemployment. And this community outreach is so important because if you are an elected representative, you are there to represent your constituents. And how better to get to know them than to knock on their door and have a meaningful conversation. So I feel everything I have learned in this past year can only benefit the community if I'm elected to this office, because I really do feel that I have a good sense of what the needs are in our community.
I'm going to break party lines here. Number one, I'm going to support Governor Quinn's plan called 8 is Enough. I think all state legislatures should be limited to 8 years in the state house, perhaps 8 in the state senate as well. Second, I support a public funding option for elections. For instance, I would support a plan that each candidate for the state house would perhaps receive $100,000 for the election if they agree not to take any other funds. And for the state senate, it would be $200,000. I think this will clean up a lot of the mess, and we'll see some more transparency and a lot less corruption in the government. For instance, I haven't taken any PAC money, but my opponent has.
I believe that I was elected to represent the interests of all the people in the district. I have spent much time meeting with the mayors, meeting with the school boards, and meeting with many community organizations. And I also believe that you get the best decisions and the best work that you can do is by meeting people and hearing the most number of people. contributing in a collaborative way. And I'm going to give you an example. So when I was first elected, the Citizens for Greener Evanston came to me and talked to me about their interest in an offshore wind farm. And I listened to them, and what we realized is that we really needed a state law to really figure out how the state, the lake bed could be leased and what were the parameters for setting up this offshore wind farm. We met and we developed legislation. We worked very hard on it together. And then we decided to pass a bill that was just going to have an offshore wind council to begin with, bring in all the interested parties throughout the state and figure out how we're going to do this project. So we did that, and I passed the legislation, and then we had the council actually met, came up with their report, and I'm happy to say we're going to be putting in more legislation next year to actually implement the findings of the report.
Just for clarification, first of all, that the mics are switchable, so if you're holding it by the switch, it may be going on and off. It also may be a bad cable. If you do want time for a response, use the little orange card to see it, because I just don't see as far as I used to. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can't believe anybody seriously questions whether Illinois' politicians are corrupt. You can't read a newspaper without reading about it. The Sun-Times and the Tribune have both written extensive articles about the corruption. I've read 5 books in the last 4 months about the corruption in Illinois, about the tax that we pay, the corruption tax, and loss of jobs, loss of income. So of course Illinois is corrupt, and cleaning up that corruption is the most important thing. It opens the floodgates. Breaking the back of Madigan's machine. Breaking the back of Madigan's machine. Priority number 1 if you want an honest government. And I do love when incumbents talk about all the activity that they've engaged in, meetings and conferences and legislation, but we don't see any results. Activity with bad results doesn't mean anything.
Thank you. We're going to give you 2-minute answers on this one, because we're going back, even though you distributed some information about your opinions on the pension system. It's one of the 2 largest drivers of the Illinois budget crunch. There's a number of fixes that have been proposed for what to do going forward, especially for new hires. The question is, can we keep the promises made in the past to present retirees and still operate a government without a massive tax hike? And do you personally have any measures that you favor for reducing the unfunded liability? If you do, how much will it reduce that deficit by, and by when? You can do that in 2 minutes, right, Glenn?
I'm just trying to remember all those questions.
It's basically talking more about the accumulated unfunded liability rather than changes going forward. Oh, yes, you're for Glenn. That's what I meant.
Eventually, I'm going to get that here, guys. We'll get this down. I work in the financial services industry. I work with clients with pensions, 401k plans. I'm very well versed in this. Part of the question was about, can they keep the promise? Well, you know, you got to ask yourself, was the promise fair to begin with? That's number 1. We're sitting on $100 billion, maybe $150 billion in unfunded pension liability. Who the heck knows? You know why? Because there's so many variables in the equation. How, what's the return going to be on the investments? How many people, we don't know. So at this point right now, I feel sorry for the public workers. I think they've been lied to, they've been screwed over for years, primarily by the Democratic Party, sorry for being partisan. But again, they've had complete control for the last 10 years. They've had control, Madigan's been speaker for 30, so at any point in time they could have changed this. They could have went in, made it fair for the employees, made sure that the government actually put the money in that they were promising, but they did not. So now we're sitting here today, and they're crying the blues going, what are we going to do? They've had complete control to change it. So as a financial person, I'm going to say, no, we cannot pay off the benefits without a number of things, but one of them will have to be benefit cuts. But I've told the public sector workers, whenever I talk to them, never go first. The politicians came back and they voted on their own pensions to see if they could reduce them. Guess what? They voted it down. So until the politicians who screwed it up for everybody else show some leadership and reduce their pensions, I wouldn't tell any public sector worker to accept any kind of reduction. you're gonna have to look at this as a three-pronged solution. On the front end, you're gonna have to go to 401k plans for all new employees. The government has proven they cannot manage the risk for the employees or the risk for the taxpayers. So over 20, 30 years, we go to a 401k plan, we'll get out of that liability. For everybody on the back end, we're gonna have to look at reducing the COLAs, get it manageable. Everybody in the middle, we're gonna have to look at benefit reductions and move over to something like a cash balance pension plan, sort of a hybrid between the two. But at the end of the day, no one solution is gonna work. You're gonna have to do all of those things that I mentioned, and then pray a lot.
The first thing you have to understand on pensions is that while the press writes about scandals in pensions, and there are examples and they are horrific, but the majority of people receiving pensions are good people who have done good work for all of us. And the tragedy is that their pensions, ones that we've promised them, we don't have the money to pay, and if we keep going at this rate and do not make cuts, there will be no money. So it is better for the state workers to have cuts now and end up with pensions rather than have some of them end up with nothing. I'm going to read Daniel's answer because that way I'll get it right. I've worked diligently on the public pension issue in our state since my arrival in the legislature and appointment to the House Committee on Personnel and Pensions. It's my view that a good reform package must contain the following three elements: adjustments to the benefit package for current participants that are significant enough to keep the growth of our annual payment into the pension systems in line with economic growth going forward. I am not dogmatic about which levers should be used to achieve these savings, but my bias is to adjust every variable at our disposal, e.g. employee contribution, retirement age, cost of living adjustment, definition of final average salary, etc. A moderate amount rather than picking a single variable and changing it radically. A mechanism to ensure that the state pay its actuarial required share going forward. Indeed, by far the single biggest driver of our current problem is the state's historical failure to make its required payment. If we reform the benefits without making sure the state pays its share in the future, we are likely to find ourselves grappling with this exact same problem a decade from now. A different package of benefits for new employees that shares the investment and actuarial risk between the state and employees. The most recent pension reform bill that was seriously considered in the House placed all new employees in a cash balance plan that I designed. That was typical Daniel went over.
You have 20 seconds if you...
20?
Yes.
Keep in mind, the reason we got into this mess was that there were politicians going to the back room and making deals with the teachers' union, making promises they can't keep. My opponent is heavily funded by the teachers' union. How good of an advocate to the taxpayer do you think he's going to be when that money trail or that money flow maybe is cut off? So again, at the end of the day, in order to fix this, you have to have no conflict of interest and be in an arm's length agreement. And the Democratic Party and my opponent is not.
Dan Biss gave a remarkably different answer when I think you were there at a meeting in Skokie, who holds a town hall meeting. He said, how do we get into this pension mess? Well, we lied, and we lied again. We acknowledge he's part of the problem. I told a teacher's conference, don't be bamboozled by people that tell you that there's a solution to the backward-facing pension. We have stuff to do going forward, 401k plans. Glenn is brilliant on this stuff, and he gets it, and you can trust him. I don't see any easy solution. I've yet to talk to anybody that has studied the plans in depth that says they see any solution on the table. It's frightening. It's why I told the Teachers Association, don't expect to get your whole pension any more than I expect to get my whole Social Security. Part of the Let's Fix It plan is shifting the pension funding obligation to local school districts. It's part of the problem. It's part of the solution because we can't trust the state to fund it properly. I'm concerned here in Evanston because when I went to Evanston schools, we vied with Newton, Massachusetts to be the top school system in the country. It's Just this year, Chicago Magazine published reports about schools in Cook County. Evanston schools didn't make the top 20. And shifting, one of the reasons they fell below was because of the amount of money spent on per student. We're below the average in Cook County. Shifting the pension responsibility to districts is only going to make that equation worse. And that's frightening me, and I no longer believe the happy talk about how great it is here in Evanston. Something has to be done about the costs that are coming our way.
In 1995, the schedule was set for paying the pensions, and it was set for a 40-year time period. And it was set at a very low rate for 10, 15 years, and then in 2008, it was supposed to start going up. It's called the ramp. And what happened in 2008, exactly at the time when the ramp was supposed to hit, we also had the financial crisis. So it was really a double whammy with our pension system. The pension obligations that we have now are eating into our entire budget. So our state budget is about almost $34 billion. Our pension payment this coming year is going to be $6.7 billion. The other things that we pay for in the budget are human services and healthcare, which is about half the budget. Another third is education, and the rest is public safety and some other programs. Obviously, we cannot continue to pay that kind of money out of our budget for the pensions. I think that we have to tread lightly, though, when we look at how we're going to fix this. I think it's very important to fix it. We have to fix it in order to make sure that the pension program will be there for people when they need it. I think that there are a number, as was said, a number of levers we can look at. I think we have to be clear that teachers do not get Social Security, so we have to be very careful when we look at the pension amounts and the COLAs that they're going to be getting. There's ideas about bifurcated COLA, so you look at people who make the lowest amount of pension payments, $30,000 a year, we receive pensions, so say $30,000 a year, and make sure that they're not hurt. A lot of the majority of teachers are women, the majority of state workers are women. I don't want to see a lot of old poor women in the future. So I think we have to address it, we have to be careful, and I am on board for looking at that this coming year.
Glenn, I gotta congratulate you. You did a fantastic job in explaining what Illinois must do to reform its pensions. And also, Eric, I give you some confidence too. You've also made some excellent points. There are two things I'd like to add. First is, I oppose shifting the burden of the teachers' pensions to the suburban school districts. I think a lot of these districts will collapse if that happens. Second, I'm going to be realistic about this. As soon as we put a pension plan reform in place, we're going to have a lawsuit. That lawsuit's going to take some time to resolve, and we may lose that lawsuit. So we have to bear this in mind too. So I'm going to say that if we do lose the lawsuit, I would be 100% in favor of calling a new constitutional convention so we can address this pension issue, because Madigan not only controls the state house, he also controls the Illinois Supreme Court. And if for some reason Tom Cross does get in office, and we do make the forms that Glenn suggested, which are excellent, we may get to the problem of having this overturned. So I think we need some patience, and we also need to prepare to actually go and have a new constitutional convention if need be.
When it comes to pension reform, I have a lot of concerns, and my main concern is for retirees who are living on fixed incomes. We have many people in the state who worked hard for many years paying into their pension programs, and now that they have retired, they're afraid that if there is a change in their income, they're going to lose their homes because they are on such a fixed income. So I really feel we need to protect those who have already retired. That being said, there are abuses in the system, and the abuses in the system cost taxpayers a lot of money. Unfortunately for us, the people who gamed the system have done so legally. So I think the state legislature needs to go in and create strict rules so that cannot happen again. We need to find a sustainable system. We need a system that's sustainable for the taxpayer and also sustainable for people who are receiving pensions. Going forward, we need to change the system because, as Robin said, if we keep going on the track that we're going on now, we're going to have so many services that we just cannot afford to fund. And these are necessary services for people in the state of Illinois.
Thanks. We have a little extra time on this, and because Mr. Frank brought up the possibility of a lawsuit, and Ms. Fine, you alluded to what having been done in the past being done legally. Would each of you just say yes or no, and Liz, to the extent you can speak for this, whether or not you would support a constitutional amendment to eliminate the perceived barrier to changing current benefits? Why don't we start there and just go right down the line? It's pretty much just a yes or a no.
Does the audience understand why a constitutional amendment was necessary?
Okay, just to explain, the Illinois Constitution currently states that pension benefits are a contractual obligation that can't be altered, and I'm not quoting exactly. And that's been postulated as a large potential barrier to any attempts to alter current benefits for existing retirees.
They can be reduced. They can be altered. They can't be reduced. From the lawyer.
I would assume we have at least 10 lawyers in the room. But, the question is, would you support a constitutional amendment to eliminate that barrier perceived or real?
Not at the current time, it's not the right way to proceed.
Constitutional amendment.
Yes.
I'd be willing to look at it.
Yes.
It can be amended.
No, you said yes or no.
Well, I'll go all the way. I'll say yes. I'll support the constitutional amendment, which would remove the barriers to the benefits problem.
I don't think that there is an easy yes or no answer to this question. It's one that would have to be looked at with great certainty, and I would be willing to consider it, but I have to know what the details would be of the change before I can say yes or no.
I want to make a note that the two Democrats didn't have an answer, and the two Republicans had two nice, concise answers. Is that common? So I would say yes, the constitutional amendment means we can go in and change benefits. I'm not a lawyer, but I think we got to have that fight. We've already talked about it, said you got to change the benefits anyway, or it's going to go broke. So we may as well have that battle now, start the lawsuits, let it fly, because there's no money there to pay anyway.
Sorry, I looked through Daniel's stuff, and that question is not answered in papers again.
Of course, that's consistent.
Thank you. Now, we've had a number of questions and concerns expressed in our survey about crime. As you probably know, municipal police enforce the law, and counties prosecute the criminals, and the state's role is mainly to set penalties, fund the courts, and run the prisons. So this is largely going to focus on prisons. Is Governor Quinn correct to be closing prisons, including prisons like TAMS? And how would you vote to change our criminal justice system's spending priorities? I guess I have to choose somebody. That'll be you, Robin, to start. That last microphone down there. Shouldn't have.
So closing the prisons has been quite a big issue in Springfield, and when we look at the budgets. At this point, many of our prisons, the cost to have somebody incarcerated is over $16,000 a year. And with budget cuts, there are fewer and fewer programs to rehabilitate prisoners. The vast majority of people in prison are there for drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenses. There's been a lot of discussion about letting some of these people serve their time not in the prison system, so we don't have to pay $16,000 a year, have them serve their time at home with the ankle bracelets. And I would support that. I think that our money is not spent in the best way in the prison system. I think TAMS needs to be closed. There are people in TAMS who should not be there, who are under lockdown 23 hours a day. I mean, it's kind of a torture chamber. So I do think there's quite a few savings in the criminal justice system. I'm working actually on a bill for juveniles around probation for them, and some of them have to be on probation for a very long time. So I've been working with the Juvenile Justice Commission on these very issues.
Actually, it comes this way.
Oh, sorry.
Did you know Evanston's murder rate is half of what Chicago's is? Crime is coming to Evanston. It's laws and prosecutors that send people to jail. I agree 100% with Robin. Adjusting what we send offenders to jail for can save a lot of money. I do believe, though, in the Zen principle, when you paint a picture of a tree, don't paint a picture of the tree, paint the forces that made that tree. So, not just addressing and throwing people into prison, but looking into the reasons for crime and why we have violence. And certainly the economy is the biggest contributor to that right now. So let's look at the forces. Let's not throw people into jail that aren't violent, that aren't harmful to us, but let's look at the risks.
That's to you, Liz. Because we're going around the imaginary.
I'm not sure this answers your question, Jeff, but I very much want to answer what was just said. Evanston's homicide rate was 6 2 years ago. Last year it was 3, and so far this year we've had 1 homicide. The crime rate has been going down each year. The 1 is too many, and I certainly want it to be 0. But in terms of the crime rate in Evanston, it is going down. I do not know Daniel's position on the prison, but I know that Daniel's position on the budget is to cut it as much as possible, and I would guess that he would find out that he would certainly be willing to consider that.
We're closing, Governor Quinn is closing the prisons because, surprise, we have no money. I hate to beat a dead horse, but we get back to pensions and Medicaid are sucking the budget dry. So if we don't fix those 2 things yesterday, there will be no money for schools, roads, prisons, whatever. Certainly not locking up nonviolent criminals would be good, but also we don't have a very good history of prosecuting violent criminals and keeping them behind bars so they don't keep repeating crimes. Now, China's taken a lot of other stuff from us. Why don't we outsource some of these prisoners? We probably get a better deal if we send them over to China and let them house them. That's a money situation, so that's my thought.
If we were to take nonviolent offenders and, now can you hear me? Nonviolent offenders and put them into programs and at-home monitoring, I think it would save the taxpayer a lot of money. And also, if we focused on rehabilitation programs, we would be able to bring people back into society so they can contribute to society, so we wouldn't have the need